You're listening to the Autism Weekly podcast. Each week, we share community voices and bring light to stories that increase awareness, acceptance, equity, access, and inclusion. If you haven't already, subscribe to join the Autism Weekly family. I'm your host, Jeff Skibitsky. This week, we're joined by Dr. Mary Barbera, a BCBAD author and autism advocate with over 25 years of experience. Dr. Barbera developed the Turn Autism Around approach, offering practical strategies to improve language, self-care, and social skills for children with autism or early signs of autism. She's also the creator of a free 10-minute assessment tool designed to guide families in taking action. Join us as we discuss her proven 4-step method, parenting strategies, and her passion for helping families worldwide. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Mary Barbera.
Thank you, Jeffrey. It's great to be here.
Well, I love your mission. I think that the more that we can empower families, the better. And that creates this, the feeling that parents have a role and they're guiding the treatment process and that they have a voice as things go. And we're there to serve. But before we go down that whole approach of empowering families, I'd love to hear from you. What brought you into this line of work? What inspired you initially? Because we all have that story of passion, of wanting to give back. But what drove you here?
Yeah, so I often say I fell into the autism world, quote unquote, in the late 1990s when my firstborn son, Lucas, started showing signs of autism. At the time, I was a registered nurse, married to a physician, and I didn't want to hear the word autism. In my first book, I talk about like when he said the word autism, my husband, I said, I never, ever want to hear the word autism again. And I went into a deep state of denial and missed a critical window of time when I could have been intervening. However, Lucas, went to typical preschool when he was 2. He did speech therapy. He didn't look that impaired to anyone. And it was back in the late 1990s before social media, the internet was just starting. And, I was just hoping that it would just get better. But in the meantime, from 21 months when my husband first mentioned the possibility of autism until the day before he was 3 when he was diagnosed with moderate severe autism, it was a process of coming to terms with the fact that he wasn't catching up. And, he was coming out of 2-year-old toddler preschool, and I was trying to get him to say ball, and other kids were coming out asking if they could go to Johnny's house to play. Mm-hmm. So that's my fall. And then very rapidly, because I had a master's degree in nursing administration and managed a nursing unit at the University of Penn Hospital and Jefferson Hospital and, all that medical background. And I was always in the neuro field of being a registered nurse, and rehab and neuro and multidisciplinary evaluations and goals. And so it really came naturally. I'm like, okay, what do we got to do? I quickly founded the Autism Society in my county. I ended up in a due process case when Lucas was 3, and my lawyer, who had an adult son with autism, told me to look into becoming a behavior analyst. And I was like, what's that? And at the time, he's like, you need a master's degree, you know what you're doing. So I then became a BCBA in 2003. I worked for a big statewide grant in Pennsylvania called the Pennsylvania Verbal Behavior Project, which is now the Patent Autism Initiative. It's still going strong after 2 decades. And so, there I was empowering professionals. And so I then eventually earned a PhD in leadership. I wrote 2 books. One is the Verbal Behavior Approach. It's in 19 or 20 languages now. Mark Sundberg did the foreword. I've traveled around the world speaking about autism. And then my latest book, called Turn Autism Around is just came out in 2021. And but for the last 10 years, I've been providing online courses for parents and professionals for a decade now, which is really exciting. And we have participants from over 100 countries. So I've gone from full circle from that very confused, overwhelmed mom in denial to keynote speaker, international expert and author, and just trying to move people forward, and both parents and professionals.
Yeah, and I think today we'll probably be hitting a lot on the beginning of that circle, the trying to be able to help people understand, learn those basic skills, being able to start working with their children. But you had mentioned that you were able to access a diagnosis at 3 years of age, and that's probably because you have the resource, you had the resources available to you. You were in medicine. You're, like you said, your husband was able to, and with your background as well, is that you guys as physicians and nurses were able to pick up on some of those signs and move your child through the system. Most people don't have that. We've gotten better at diagnosing. We've gotten more efficient, but the throughput does not allow us to catch up. So a lot of kids are waiting and waiting. So tell me a little bit about that journey for some of the families that maybe you've spoken to who, they recognize the sign and they still can't get care and are sitting there with no resources. What have you heard from families on that end?
And that's really been my passion is when I started creating online courses, it was for, parents of kids with autism. And then I created an early learner course, then an intermediate learner course. And then I was like, I want to get down to the babies. I need to go back down the mountain and create a toddler preschooler course for people with and without a diagnosis, waiting for a diagnosis. Because even pre-COVID, I was hearing and seeing and writing 9 months to 2 years waiting lists. And, and that's for families who get out of, my problem was getting out of denial. But if I would have had more information coming in, I think there is definitely less stigma, more awareness, and the rate now, when Lucas was diagnosed, it was 1 in 500. Now it's 1 in 36, potentially, much more in boys, So the awareness, I think, and the denial isn't as much of a problem. Although a lot of families have told me that one of the spouses is in denial, or the grandmas have told me that they're joining the course because they can't get their children, the parents of the little kids, to recognize and to take it seriously. I used to say, as soon as you see delays, get early intervention, sign up for an evaluation, sign up for ABA, sign up, get on waiting lists. But now, really, I tell people, be aware, find the CDC milestones, compare your child's progress, maybe get evaluations, not to say that you don't want to get an early diagnosis and early intervention started. But what I see sometimes is that if parents do get early intervention, they've got 3 different individuals who are usually not behavioral, and they're giving advice that is contradictory to each other, and making things more confusing and not being as, efficient in terms of getting a child into behavioral intervention, and not just any behavioral intervention, because I have a Turn Autism Around podcast, has over 300 episodes. I've interviewed people and I've talked to people that have experienced not so great ABA services. So my Turn Autism Around approach and my ABA is all positive, child-friendly, with my background as a nurse, as a behavior analyst, as a mom, and as an advocate. And in my book, I talk about, like, the parent, if at all possible, one parent should become the captain of the ship if you have the wherewithal to do it. And sometimes that's the grandma, sometimes that's the dad, sometimes that's assigned to a nanny. Somebody has to kind of coordinate
Mm-hmm.
and make sure that what everyone is doing is going to benefit the child.
Yeah. And I think as professionals is that I'd like to hope that we've gotten better at it, but I don't know that professionals are good at that piece yet of coordinating, of even speaking the same language. Everybody wants to use their own terminology. And I would imagine that utilizing the turn autism around approach is that you're speaking directly to your audience. You're talking directly to the parents. You're not getting them lost in the language of speech pathologist, occupational therapist, behavior analyst, pediatrician. Is like they're not having to digest all that stuff and make sense of what every single person's telling me, is that you're giving practical approaches. But maybe we can go there. Because when we talked earlier, this isn't just about children already diagnosed with autism. These are about people that are demonstrating some characteristics of delays, areas where they can improve. What are those core areas that the turn autism around approach targets? Because it sounds global to me. It sounds like anything that any of us would benefit from.
Right. So on in chapter 2 of Turn Autism Around is it autism, ADHD, or just a speech delay? Um, and really, I go over 10 potential signs. Um, and these aren't I mean, there are some that we can all agree are signs, but there's some nuances, like a child that's very has a lot of tantrums, a lot of problem behaviors. Yes, they have a speech delay, but I had children get evaluated that screamed the entire session. Like even with reinforcement, even with mom in the room, like that is abnormal. That is not, so some of those signs are a little bit, my realization after 25 years in the world. But it doesn't matter if it's going to end up to be autism or ADHD potentially, or a learning disability, or giftedness, or during COVID isolation, the child wasn't leaving the home, wasn't exposed. You know, you don't know, and I say this a lot. Like my son Lucas is now 28. He needs 24/7 supervision. He's made amazing progress, and he's he's very good. Um, and his younger brother, who's 18 months younger, Spencer, has now become a physician. He is, he was gifted, he was social, he was the leads in the shows. But when Spencer was little, um, he was kind of obsessed with trains. He was. Um, he had ear infections constantly. He was sick. He didn't sleep well. He was a picky eater. How much of this was me just trying to deal with all of this? But like you don't know how that's going to turn
Yeah.
out. And Lucas also had regressive autism. So even with any baby, toddler, you know, like my newest book has chapters on picky eating, sleeping, potty training. I also, you know, I was doing a lot of work, and I know these techniques, and I know you know this too, Jeff, is these techniques work for every child.
Mm-hmm.
But so yeah, like capturing kids before the diagnosis, I think is really important. And that's really when parents do have the time and do have the access to the child to become the captain of the ship. I mean, they're in
Absolutely.
charge anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're in charge of SLPs coming to their house, and they're in charge of taking kids to dental visits, and they're in charge
Mm-hmm.
of play dates, and they're in charge of what they eat, what they serve them. Once kids get to school or to an ABA clinic all day long, they have very little control.
Yep. And they're their child's biggest advocate. And that's important for us to remember, is that we need to be listening to the families there. You had mentioned is that we don't know how it turns out. And I always kind of go back to I never want to not give voice to the value of intervening early and what that presents for a family. If you can start doing or establishing new skills or being able to change historic behaviors before they become valuable for that child and maybe even more maladaptive as time comes on and harder to be able to modify or to make valuable for engaging in the community or friendships. But what is it that you would be telling families as far as why it's so important when you identify those signs to make the decision to start doing something at that point? And it sounds like you wrote a whole book on it, but what is the common theme?
Yeah, your brain neurologically is most plastic when you're young, and so it can be changed. Um, Also, like from a neurologic point of view, if you have a stroke or you have a heart attack or you have a head injury, the first 24 hours, the first year, the first month, you're gonna see many more gains than if it's not treated, you know. So I think um, you are going to be, I want to empower parents to be the captain of the ship and to become their child's best teacher and best advocate for life. Um, Whether you have a typical child, but at 1 and 2 and 3, you don't know what kind of struggles your children are going to have. You don't know if they're going to get bullied at school or get have trouble reading or have a math disability or have an addiction problem down the line or whatever is going to come down the line. But I think these techniques to just empower yourself to learn how to engage your child, even if I know you featured Dr. Omni Clint on your podcast recently. I didn't get a chance to listen to it, but I'm a big fan of his work. I quote his work in chapter 1 of my Turn Autism Around book, and he says, like, basically that social reciprocity of the mama and the baby and they're looking at each other, babbling back and forth and that sort of thing. And when that starts to get off track is really, when they start to get picky eating, when they start to not sleep well, um, when they're falling behind is the best time to kind of try to bring that back.
Yeah.
And Not that it's the parents' fault, that you're not doing anything wrong. It's just that if you can try to learn techniques that can help the situation in all of the situation, help increase language, help increase uh, following directions, if you can help increase their food variety, help increase their sleep, help decrease problem behaviors across the
Hmm.
board, it's going to make your life short term and long term much better.
Yeah, and that's for everybody involved. That's for the child, that's for the family, that's for the siblings who might have stronger interactions or might be able to have more of the parents' time because of what might be occurring with the child that you're trying to be able to help support and empower with those new skills. Well, let's get into the approach because I mean we talked about how important it is to identify, how important it is to start as a family to know what you can do to empower your child. But we never really got yet into what are those 4 steps? How do we go about this?
Yeah. And um, the Turn Autism Around approach is also equivalent to the verbal behavior approach, which is the name of my first book. It's also equivalent to the Barbera method. And the reason these 4 steps are so proven and validated is it's basically the 4 steps to the scientific method. You assess, you make a plan, you intervene, and you collect data to make sure what you're doing is working. And if it's not working, you change the intervention.
Hmm.
Um, and it's a big cycle. So whenever we have a problem in our lives, or we're thinking there's a deficit, the first step is assessment.
Hmm.
And when I was working with school districts in the state of Pennsylvania, at first we used the ABLES way back, and then we used the VB map. But I'm still a huge fan of the VB map. I helped field test the VB map in 2006. So, and that's all great, but a lot of times the VB map, especially for level 2 and level 3 learners, takes hours and hours and takes a lot of expertise. And so over time, I developed my own assessment, a snapshot assessment,
Hmm.
which it's in the appendices for the verbal behavior approach. It's a 5-page assessment. I took that, and on page 49 of Turn Autism Around is a 1-page assessment. And then in 2022, because I was in a mastermind with other online entrepreneurs outside of the autism world, a lot of them were creating software. And I was like, I want a software. So I spent a lot of money and a lot of time taking my 1-page assessment and building software, which is now it was called the Turn Autism Around Assessment, but this is really not about autism. It's about finding strengths and needs, finding delays potentially. It's now called the Barbera Early Childhood Assessment, and with the acronym BECA, BECA. It's not validated yet, but I am working with researchers to hopefully get that validated and a reliable tool. It is software that I said would be free for the first 1,000 people, and now we've had over 50,000 people take it, and it's still free at the time of this recording anyway. marybarbera.com/assessment. You can take it, you can retake it. We have really amazing pre and post scores, and it identifies scores in 3 main areas: self-care and adaptive skills, eating, sleeping, potty, grooming, and dressing.
Hmm.
Next big category is language and learning skills, both expressive and receptive language, as well as imitation, matching, social skills. And then the third area is problem behaviors. So you get scores in 3 areas. The higher the score, the better. We have field tested it with many, many children, both with and without autism. Like I said, we've seen nice pre and post gains. And I think that the thing about my program and even research possibilities in the future is, and I've published some research in the past, but usually research is like very narrow. You ask one question about one little thing.
Hmm.
Using transfer procedures to teach tax to a child with autism, which is a publication of mine in 2005, for instance. Asked one question, used one subject. But my approach works on all of these things all at the same time, and doesn't require a doctoral level BCBA to work on it. Not to say
Hmm.
that they won't eventually need ABA and a doctoral level BCBA to figure things out. But if we can get families before the diagnosis empowered and working on this, I mean, I've had, people say, one of the testimonials is, she started this, and then the early intervention professional came in and they were like, it's like you had 20 intervention sessions already from a month ago when I saw him. Like,
Hmm.
oh, I published a white paper with my mentor, Dr. Rick Cabina, on a little girl, Elena, who went from 2 words in an hour to 180 words and phrases with 33 days of my course only as the only intervention, because it was during COVID. She didn't leave the house. She didn't get any intervention. And I was just her mom going through the course. I mean, I couldn't even believe that. I was like, what? Um, But
That's awesome. That's what you want to hear.
yeah, I mean, I'm like, I know my stuff works, but that sounds unbelievable. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Hmm.
And not that everybody's going to make those gains, um, but you know what? Any gains are good gains, right?
Yep.
And any step forward. And so I'm really excited to just keep getting the word out that I, I have a program. It is a proven four-step approach. I've seen I've seen lots of people talking about it, and it's not just for parents. I provide BCBA credits and early intervention, contact hours, because we can't expect, and I say this in my first book, we can't expect a parent to learn how to do mans and break a cookie into 10 pieces and do man to tack transfers or receptive to tack transfers if we don't have professionals um, really leading the way. So,
Hmm.
I know my approach is different. It's different than if you just use a VB, unfortunately, a lot of professionals still, don't know about my approach, and that's fine. Like I tell my participants, my online course, like if you can search for people that use the VB map, that use a verbal behavior approach, you're at least getting a little closer to my approach. But then if you could layer my approach on and really work with the families, because
Hmm.
now the families, at least the families that take my courses and really go all in, are getting to be quite the experts.
Yeah, I mean the way that you're describing this, of course I immediately see the value for those that are waiting for treatment. There's so many people out there right now who are saying, please give me something I could be doing to be able to help my family function better while I'm waiting for extra supports. And this would fit that gap. But it sounds like it's also fitting the gap of that continuity of empowerment of the family to be actively involved in decision making, being able to make their own behavior changes going on, and potentially to be able to fade out of any sort of intensive care quicker because they are able to empower themselves, empower others, and be a part of that change process from day one and incorporate and modify their environment for more learning opportunities, more success in the absence of clinicians in their home. Is that pretty accurate that it's hitting on both those
Yeah.
areas?
I mean, even if you have the best of the best ABA therapy, in school or in clinic for 8 hours a day, 6 hours a day,
Hmm.
there is still a whole lot of time from the time, we say children need engagement, engagement and treatment of problem behaviors and new learning during most of
Hmm.
their waking hours. And that's 80 to 100 hours a week. So even if you had a 40-hour ABA program, you still have more than that time of engagement. And if parents don't know, and actually, I did write another paper on the experiences of autism mothers who become behavior analysts. And one of the things that helps with family stress is the family's ability to control aggression and other problem behaviors. So yes, this is not just for little kids. It's for anyone who struggles with talking, tantrums, picky eating, sleeping, potty training, going to the doctor's, dentist, haircuts without a fuss. I mean, these are, real problems of many, many families.
Yeah, and where's that push and pull of, and I hear this from families, and actually it's something that I constantly try and figure out where those boundaries are while guiding our own teams, is making a parent a clinician versus empowering them with clinical skills to help them to better empower and parent their child through some of these things. Where's the give and take on that? And what's the parental feedback on, I love being able to know how to do this. I love being able to do some of the drills, but when it gets to this point where all I'm doing are drills versus changing the way I'm engaging my child in the environment or using more naturalized approaches. What's the balance on that? What's the parent saying right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very individual. Like I come from neuro medicine, and my Lucas's original, there wasn't even behavior analyst back then, but his behavior person said, like, I should get a babysitter for Spencer and do 3 to 5 hours of therapy with Lucas a week, and that would really help me understand and whatever. And it really did. And I felt empowered by that. Not everyone is going to have the skills or the motivation to do that, and that's okay. And it's not about, I tell the families, like, you want to be the captain of the ship, but you're not going to see me, like, as a mom sitting down for 6 hours a day and doing therapy with my son. Like, I don't recommend that. I recommend, you know, starting, and we have a whole process for table time where it's fun. It's mixture of natural environment and intensive teaching, and um and then taking those skills and being able to go to the grocery store and label apple and those sorts of things. And but then at that point, when he needs, 3 hour 2 blocks, um then it's past time when we get ABA therapy. I'm working, I have a high touch coaching program as well. And I was just meeting with a family. The mom's a physician, and she had a behavior tech there, and a BCBA on the call with me. And that behavior tech is 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon or evening. And they were wondering, like, how much table time, how much, you know, what's the flow going to look like? And mom even said that on the weekend she has this is a 2-year-old child who really needs a lot of intensive, like, he needs a lot of structure.
Yeah.
If you just, like, expect natural environment to go well, it's not really doing it. So she said even on the weekends she's feeling like she needs to, like, engage him more in
Yeah.
structure and table time and stuff. So I said to the therapist, you're there to work, like, so, it's not like we never want a child forced into sitting at a table or anything like that. It all has to be fun. And if it's not going well, our instructions off our demands or reinforcement. And so it's really good to see. So yeah, I don't force people to become clinicians. I don't, it's a very unique role though.
It
But
is.
there does need to be kind of a captain of the ship, manager of the whole thing,
Absolutely.
for it to go the best it can go.
Yeah, and just reading through the testimonials and just knowing the way that you've been able to put the program together, it sounds like it's immediately meeting the needs of diverse learners and diverse coaches. So I mean, the parents being able to, like you said, captain the ship. They're making the decisions on what's important, what's valuable for them and for their child at any given time, and they have the voice in that. So it becomes more individualized to what the needs are of the child and the family. Does that tie directly into the assessment as well as is it tied to the assessment and the planning of any sort of treatment that the parent might be doing?
Yeah, so once you do the assessment, that BECA assessment is really the core of things. We also do language samples pre and post the course. Some kids need language samples every day, every week, every month. We do a couple videos pre and post, so we have that permanent product. But then we take the BECA and we go line by line. And this is even in my book. We go first column, okay, safety, that's a need. We put that on the needs. Okay, picky eating. No, he's good with picky eating. He's not addicted to a pacifier. Okay, eating is a strength. And we go line by line, because the child could be 18 months, he could be 8 years old, he could be 18. It doesn't matter. We just have to find each person's strengths and needs and then make a plan and help things get better. So it is very individualized. And yes, my assessment, my BECA assessment is really the core of finding your starting or restarting point. Like, it doesn't have to be, you could have the best thing going, but if you're still struggling in this area, it doesn't cost anything. Just get started with the assessment and take it from there. And, there's more learning. I mean, the book, the online course, I've got thousands of videos, millions of YouTube views. Like there's all kinds of learning, the online courses, high touch coaching. I'm creating things. I would love to have more professional certification or something like that. We've tried some renditions. We have a couple coaches now that are well trained. Um, and down the line, as the need for Barbera method or whatever we're going to call it, grows, we need people.
Absolutely. And I mean, and one of the things I constantly look at, no matter what treatment's being provided, is looking to try and figure out, what's the outcome. And I think a really good way to look at the empowerment of family members is quality of life. Is that, do you have any subjective or anecdotal or objective information as far as how families are responding, what feedback you're getting on that?
I mean, it's all throughout our Facebook groups. We have Facebook groups for the toddler course and the school age course and the verbal behavior bundle, all access membership. And, we have people posting almost every day, like, thank God I found your courses and I started implementing and we were here and now we're here. And my, little Elena, who's in the white paper, her mom's a coach now for me. And she's in first grade, totally, no support. Really, she could, I don't think they've formally undiagnosed her, but there is really no issues at all. She's gifted in a lot of ways, very social. So, I mean, it really is, warms my heart, but also, lets me know that I'm on the right track, that I'm just going to keep going. And yeah, so this is my plan. Just keep going, try to get some real research. I mean, one of the reasons I published my white paper, which does have standardized speech scores pre and post, language samples that are a part of my course pre-post during COVID. I tried to get that published. My mentor, Rick Cabina, and I tried to get that published in a peer-reviewed journal. And, not a great design because it was like a retrospective case study, but more of, you have a vested interest into proving your stuff works. And it's like, so that's one of the reasons I created the software, quite frankly, is because like I know it works, and it's just a matter of now attracting researchers. I do have a few researchers that are interested, and we've been in meetings, but like I have a lot of data, I have a lot of subjective reports. It makes sense. I mean, there's nothing harmful about it. I don't want any crying. I don't want any problem behaviors. I'm teaching parents how to do it all at the same time, and teaching professionals too. So, but yeah, hopefully in the next years and decades, we'll have, and the other nice thing about it too is, even if you're full in on another model of ABA or you're full in on something else, you can incorporate this.
Mm-hmm.
Families could incorporate this without the professionals. I mean, it's ideal if everybody kind of incorporates the same thing for the child so the child can do the best, but it's not the kind of thing where you have to just stop everything you're doing and incorporate this whole new way.
Mm-hmm.
You can go as slow or as fast as you want.
Yeah, I mean, just immediately just looking at what you've created as I look at the accessibility of care already being a positive step in the right direction, is that you're empowering more people to get care earlier or to be able to start care when there are no providers that are even in the area. But you're also broadening the community of supports. And the biggest one being the parental supports, is that now they have a way to be able to continue whatever it is that you're working on from morning to night, every single day, where there's consistency. And that's so important for any of the children, whether they're diagnosed autistic or not. Consistency is such a wonderful thing for a child to have to be able to develop a new way to engage their environment. So I appreciate all the work that you're doing. Is there any, I don't know, website that people should be jumping to or other resources that folks need to know about on this topic that you can guide us?
Well, my website is marybarbera.com, and I have thousands of videos and podcasts. So when people post on different groups, and say, oh, anybody have any, thing on picky eating? And then somebody will tag me, or, you know, the most efficient way, because if you have a question about autism or signs of autism, I probably have a video on it. So just type in search or go to my website, marybarbera.com, in the magnifying glass at the top. You can search exactly what you're looking for there. You can also just do a Google search, Mary Barbera, Mary Autism, and then the topic. Response to name, chewing and mouthing, pica, biting, tantrums, you name it. I probably am addressing it. And if I don't, email us and maybe we'll do a video.
A resource that keeps building on itself. Wonderful to
Yeah.
hear.
But instead of tagging me, because I don't have time to go and everything, and, do your own, what would Mary say? You can find it. And I probably have like a little video that just sums it up. And then you could send that to a parent. Parents in denial. How do I get them out of denial? I was in denial. I understand how to get people out of denial.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the insight, the effort that you put into creating these wonderful products, but then also the time that you've given us today to help spread that message. So, Mary, thank you so much for joining our podcast today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Autism Weekly. We hope you tune back in next week to learn more about autism in the real world. Autism Weekly is now found on all the major listening apps, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. Subscribe to be notified when we post a new podcast. Autism Weekly is produced by ABS Kids. ABS Kids is proud to provide diagnostic assessments and ABA therapy to children with developmental delays like autism spectrum disorder. You can learn more about ABS Kids and the Autism Weekly podcast by visiting abskids.com. Thanks for tuning in. See you again next week.